The end of the year list continues as we dive in and talk about our favorite things and some of our least favorite things from 2024. We've talked about movies, we've talked about video games, and today we're actually going to be ranking every new TV show that I watched in the year 2024, including some of the worst, including some of the best. But when it comes down to TV, I'm very particular with what I watch. So if I don't like it, I won't continue it, and it will not be on this list. For the most part, anything I've watched on this list, I enjoy to a certain degree, but some of it may have just not worked for me. But again, this is subjective. You might hate some of these series, you might love some of them, but that's where we're here to have a conversation down below in the comments section. And as a point of view, I know a lot of people are going to say, where is Shogun? I still did not have the time to watch it. When it came out, I was getting married. And then we had a kid later this year, so my year has been very busy. If I didn't really cover the series already on my channel, there's a high chance that I didn't get a chance to actually just watch it. But I am very excited to finally check out Shogun in 2025. But without further ado, let's get into my ranking of all 27 TV shows that I watched in the year 2024. Coming in at my number 27 is Echo. Now, when I first initially watched Echo, they sent us the press screen. We got the first 3 episodes, and I enjoyed it. I thought, okay, this is kind of solid. I really like this. And then the last 2 episodes just fell apart, like absolutely and completely, to the point where Echo made me just not enjoy the show. And when I went back to rewatch it again later this year, I again just did not find it as enjoyable as I did the first time around. I think Echo has some good thoughts. It has some good layers, but it just feels like that early Disney Plus model that Marvel didn't know what the hell they were doing. And it feels like Echo was really rechambered and re-edited back in the back room to kind of figure out what they actually want the series to be. And honestly, I don't think Marvel knew what they wanted the series to be either. Which brings me down to my number 26, which is Quiet on Set. I think a lot of people are going to probably have this one a little bit higher. I am just not a huge fan of documentary set TV series, so these usually tend to fall towards the lower half, but I still found Quiet on Set to be an eye-opening experience, one that I think was just kind of rumored throughout, like Hollywood, specifically on the Nickelodeon sets, but then once it actually came out, this doc, it really was eye-opening, specifically some of the stuff with Drake Bell. And I think what I really liked about Quiet on Set was what it did for the zeitgeist of pop culture. But again, for some reason, it has not stuck with me with every single moment that was in it. It's more of something that I now appreciate that we have. But I think in terms of how they actually made it, it didn't completely redefine anything in terms of a documentary. But again, Quiet on Set is still good. Then I'm at number 25. Earlier this year, it would have been way higher. But then the series finished, and I didn't think it finished out that well. And that's The Acolyte. Now, I was covering this week to week, and people were shitting on me because I was really liking the series. And I still contend, I liked half of the show. But it fell apart in the last 2 to 3 episodes where it just made me lose interest. Maybe some of that losing interest, sadly, was the fan base just completely ripping and tearing me apart for liking a show, which is just insane. Which is another reason why I haven't really covered Skeleton Crew, because I just didn't feel like going through that again. But The Acolyte, I love some of the ideas. I love some of the performances. I think some of the dialogue is a little bit of a miss. I think some of the scripting is a little bit of a miss. And I'm someone who was excited when this was initially announced. And then when the trailer came out, I thought it was just very boring. So I was very not that excited going into the series anymore. And I found some great things in here, and I found some bad things. And I think it has a lot of the same issues to do with Echo. It seems like the filmmakers and everyone had ideas, and then Lucasfilm or whoever behind the scenes really tore up the series by the end, because it does just feel re-edited. And in a way, I feel like The Acolyte should have just been a movie series, honestly. But that's a conversation for another time. My number 24 is Eric. Now, this is a series I didn't have any plans on watching, but my wife really wanted to check it out. I like Benedict Cumberbatch. I'm going to check this out. And after watching it, I found this to be a very intriguing series. And I think one of the biggest layers is the performances all involved. But one of the things about Eric that really surprises me, and I think isn't going to be for everybody, might be the reason that the reviews were so low on for this one, is because there is 3 different storylines going on in here, but it all revolves around a child kidnapping. And what I really appreciate about Eric was the fact that they went that direction. The fact that each of the performances did really mean something. And what I really wanted from Eric was to get a satisfying ending. And I felt that I got that satisfying ending. Do I feel that all the storylines were needed to get to that conclusion? No. Do I feel like they may have focused in on one more than the other and maybe it should have been the opposite way? Yes. But I think Eric deserves better than what the reviews provided. I think Benedict Cumberbatch was fantastic in this. And at my number 23 is Bad Batch, the final season. I have a soft spot for the Bad Batch. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's because I love the Clone Wars so much. Maybe it's because I just find the characters to be quite enjoyable. But I also just find Bad Batch to be a really good time. It's a piece of Star Wars media that I feel like would have been made on, again, Cartoon Network or back in the day when they were making Rebels, Clone Wars. And it's like a lost legacy, a lost piece of history for Star Wars. It nostalgically reminds me of a time of Star Wars that I don't think we'll ever get again in terms of animation. And at my number 22 is the second part to Invincible. I think only the second part came out this year, but I feel like I'm right on that. And for me, as I mentioned in my review for that, I liked this series. I loved the first season. I loved the comic books, but I found that splitting the second season up into 2 parts was one of the worst choices that I've ever seen a studio do. And I found the second half of Invincible to be decent. I liked it. I think it works better when you actually get to watch all the episodes back to back to back. But when you watch it, the first part, and then you split into and wait to watch the second part just feels really jumbled with its different story ideas and everything that it wants to do. And it feels like it's a very big setup season than actually addressing certain things like the first season did. So I'm hoping season 3 can get us back on board. Again, I say this as someone who knows what's going to happen, what the comics are going to do. And usually from what I saw in the first season, they did a good job addressing and changing things for the better. And I felt that season 2 didn't really do that overall. They kind of felt more of the storyline. And even again, like the things that I feel like they should have addressed more or like focused on a little bit tighter, they didn't do it at all. My number 21, another series that I feels like people just turned on after season 3, but that's Umbrella Academy season 4 or the final season of Umbrella Academy. Now, I have a soft spot for this family too. I think for me, I love the performances hands down every single time I've watched this series. That is the reason that I continue to rewatch it, is because of the family dynamic, because of the cast, and because of what you get from them. And I was excited to see what we were going to be able to get from a final season. Now, I know season 3 was very disappointing for many. For me, I loved it. I love seasons 2, 3, and especially 1. But for me, I really needed a good ending for this. And after sitting on it, while I like the idea of what they did for 4's ending, I don't think it feels earned at all. I feel like this season felt rushed. It felt like they should have been a little bit more tighter and focused if it was going to be less episodes. And the fact that it is less episodes makes me also believe that we needed a little bit more from this all. So Umbrella Academy season 4, it's a decent season. One with, I think, good ideas. One with some good endings. And one that overall an ending that makes sense. But in the end of the day, it doesn't feel earned. And if it doesn't feel earned, then it makes you think back on it and be like, I don't know. My number 20 is Dune Prophecy, which is a series that I overall have really liked. I think the initial reviews were a little bit harsh on it. And to kind of just say the least, I love the Dune world, but I've only read the original Dune novel. So I don't really know what happens going forward. I don't really know what happens going through the past. So I was expecting something cool here to get a little bit more of a knowing of everything. Now, at the time of the filming of this video, this is one of the few series on here that I didn't actually get to finish. I didn't watch the last 2 episodes, but I watched everything prior to that. And I thought the series was getting better and better and better. It still has the same Dune tone. It's slow. It's meandering. It kind of takes its time with developing certain characters, but it always feels intriguing to me. My only problem with Dune Prophecy, and the reason that it's so low on this list, is it opens up with like the living machine conversation, and I'm like, why wasn't that the show that they decided to do? That seems like very more interesting. It's more of the aftermath to that all, and I feel like having a living machine episode or a season of itself would have been stronger to then dive into all of this. Now, I understand that's Dune fanatics might be like, no, that's not the point, and I get it, but that's just like the one thing that stuck out to me. I also feel that some of Dune Prophecy feels a little bit predictable in terms of its writing, and that it's trying to be Game of Thrones, which I understand. I'm pretty sure Dune came before Game of Thrones in terms of the novels, but I really think it needed a little bit more time cooking, and I also feel like they made this show because the movies were so popular, but I still like Doom Prophecy. I think it's way better than a lot of the reviews are giving it. Number 19 is Batman the Caped Crusader. I think this was an animated series I was really looking forward to because the Batman animated series and Batman Beyond were like two of my favorite things ever. And the fact that you were having Matt Reeves and Tim come together to make a new Batman series and like more of a spiritual successor to the Batman the animated series is awesome. And I found Caped Crusader to be good. I liked it, but I wasn't blown away by it. It didn't make me go, oh my God, this is the must-watch series of the year. I found the animation to be cool. I liked how old school the series felt. I also really liked Hamish Linklater as Bruce Wayne and Batman. I thought that was like perfect casting. But also in the series, it's funny because sometimes it feels so ultra realistic, and then like we had an episode with a ghost. So like some of the things feels a little bit mixed in terms of what they were trying to do with the Caped Crusader. I also didn't feel like blown away by certain avenues of the story. But when it ended, not just because of what you get at the end, but in general, when it ended, I would watch another season of that. And I hope that it would be a little bit better written. But overall, Caped Crusader is a good time, but it's not one that blew me away. Let me get into my number 18. Now, this one, the season is not completely done yet, but I'm caught up with what is out, and that is Dexter Original Sin. Now, for people who don't know, Dexter is one of my favorite shows of all time. It's a series that it's definitely had its ups and downs. Like, I cannot lie. The original finale is terrible. Was it New Blood, First Blood? I can't remember. New Blood, I think, is what it was called. But that series, when it came back, I was so excited, and I loved it up until the finale. Like, literally loved it up until the finale. And then they announced this prequel, and they also announced a sequel series, and there's so much things going on here that I don't really know. So I've come to the point that Dexter is just like my guilty pleasure. I think the show has such a mess of a time, but Michael C. Hall is so damn compelling that I'm just excited to watch it. So going into a prequel series that I wasn't excited about at all, I have to give credit that I think the actor's name is Patrick Gibson. He's really good as a young Dexter. And I think Christian Slater's awesome in here too. I think everyone across the board is great. I think the series like over relies on like the 80s nostalgia. I think it's the 80s time. But also at the same time, it just feels a little bit overly cheesy now. Like some of the line delivery like from Patrick Dempsey just feels very off in tone. So Original Sin's kind of a mixed bag, but it's a mixed bag that I do enjoy. Then at my number 17, House of the Dragon Season 2, which I found to be a setup season overall. It's one that I liked, but not, again, loved, and I felt like that I really needed more from this season. And I know this season had a little bit of a weird dilemma, the way that it was made, the way that it was created, the way that it was shot, but when it got to the ending, which is an ending that I will still defend that I liked, because by the ending, I just, like, I noticed, yeah, this is a complete setup season. Besides, bar none, the Princess episode, which I think was episode 4, which is hands down one of the best episodes of this year. House of the Dragon Season 2 still succeeds and moves forward in a great capacity, but it still needed more depth to it, and I'm hoping that Season 3 will eventually get us to that point. It's not as good as Season 1, but it's not as bad as some of the worst seasons of Game of Thrones, but I still found it to just, again, be setup. And setup seasons can sometimes be great, and sometimes they can be boring. Then at my number 16 is Star Wars: The Skeleton Crew. Now, another one, not finished, not going to be finished until the show's actually here, but Skeleton Crew has really grown on me the more and more I think about it. And when I initially reviewed it, I might have just been a little bit hesitant towards the series because of all the backlash that I got with the Acolyte, which sucks to say because I don't want to ever go into that, but I just get genuinely nervous talking about Star Wars now on this channel. And Skeleton Crew for me is something that when my son is a little older, this will probably be one of the first things I ever show him for in terms of Star Wars and introducing him to the world. And a lot of that is because they've pitched it as Goonies in space. And it feels like Goonies in space. I think that's actually like one of the coolest ways to really look at Star Wars Skeleton Crew. And I think the series has only gotten better with every single episode. To the point where I say, I mean, you can't mess this up now. Like, I would be genuinely shocked if the back half really falls apart. But it feels like something classic, something that we just wouldn't get anymore. And it really, like, the one thing that disappoints me, and I'm happy that we have this series, but the one thing that disappoints me is the fact that I feel like as a movie, this would have been a timeless classic back in the day if this would have been made. But Nowadays, this couldn't be a movie because people just wouldn't go out and see it. But I think Skeleton Crew is a really good show that I think may turn fantastic soon. We get into my number 15. This is the Cobra Kai final season. Another season that, again, we've gotten the first 2 parts, but we've not gotten the final part, which comes out in February. Now, Cobra Kai has been really just enjoyable for me. And I think there's been a lot of a mixed talk on this final season, but I think Cobra Kai's final season, for me at least, has been widely enjoyable. The first part, setup, absolutely. The second part, very much that payoff, but also executing in a phenomenal cliffhanger that I can't wait to see how it pays out in the third season, or the third piece of this all, and the final piece of it all. So Cobra Kai, a solid time. I'm not like huge into the Karate Kid world, but this is something that I just really enjoy. Let me get into my number 14, which when I first watched this series, I was not a fan of it. But the back half really started to work on me, and that is Agatha All Along. I think by the end of this series, it became one of the better Marvel TV series, and overall made me understand and come to an appreciation more on everything that we got in this show. And that says a lot because Agatha, I never understood why we were getting a spinoff of her character. I loved WandaVision, but I was like, we do not need a spinoff of her character. And when I watched the first 3-4 episodes, I kind of was just like, okay, like it's enjoyable, but it's not mind-blowing. It's not great. It's just fine to me. But the back half 4 episodes, which is the same thing that happened with Loki season 2. When I watched the first 4 episodes, I was like, okay, like this is decent. I don't mind it, but it's not something I would go back to. And then the back half of 4 episodes of Loki season 2 made me recontextualize the entire first half, and also just appreciate it more, but also love the back half. And if you can have a strong final 4 episodes, I can really come to appreciate something. And Agatha was that way. The last 4 episodes, I sat there and I was like, oh. And when you find out the reveals, the recontextualization of all that just makes it eye-opening to you. And I found Agatha All Along to be actually great. Into my top 13, and my number 13 is Avatar: The Last Airbender, the Netflix live action series. Again, another series that people just shit on. I think people were just going to shit on it in general. It's not as good as the original show. I mean, I don't expect this series to ever be as good as the original series, but it was a lot better than I expected. And it was actually, I thought, almost perfect. The only issue I really have with this season, like genuinely, is why doesn't Aang learn waterbending, like whatsoever, or get trained? But I think that's more of a timing thing than anything else. But that feels very important, and I feel like that should have been addressed. But regardless, the performance is great. I think it really infused and grabbed onto each and every person. And this, again, is a series that only got better with each episode. And I think the one with the many face thing, I can never remember his name, that episode, once that episode hit, I feel like the series just really struck a chord with me, to where I can hold both different series in different lights and different viewpoints and enjoy both for what they are. Avatar: The Last Airbender, the original series, is one of my favorite shows of all time, one of my favorite pieces of media of all time, and I genuinely do love this new Netflix series, and I cannot wait to see season 2 and season 3 and see how they tie it all up. Then at my number 12, this for a while was one of my favorite shows of the year. Now, from what it seems like, it doesn't seem like we're going to be getting more of these characters in the second season. It feels like it's going to be like a different set of characters they follow, which doesn't really make me the happiest. So that's a little bit of what made it at my number 12. But my number 12 is Mr. and Mrs. Smith, the Donna Glover show. And a series that, again, I wasn't really that excited for, but when I got the screeners, I was like, you know what? I'll watch it. I binged the entire series in one sitting. One sitting it took me to finish this entire series. I did not want to stop. I was so hooked. I love the concept of Mr. and Mrs. Smith, but the fact that it's just like 2 random people having to pretend to get married, but then they actually do start falling for each other. And the fact that each episode deals with a very major milestone in their relationship, I found to be one of the most interesting things. And the way that it kind of like retextualizes with like certain missions, I just thought this series was so genuinely well written, and really much one of my favorite shows of this year. I'm not a fan of the ending, though, and I think a season 2 will really make or break how I feel on the first season. Just mostly because I didn't think it needed an opening of some sorts. Like, it just feels like it's there. Now, again, time will tell, but I really, really, really liked season 1. Then I'm number 11, The Bear season 3, another show that just kind of critics shit on, and I watched it, and I still went, I like this series a lot. And The Bear is a series that I just really like a lot. I don't think it's as good as season 2, but it is better than season 1 for me. And I think season 3, again, kind of repositions everyone into a great light. I don't think anyone really got a big character changing moment, but I think when you get episodes with Tina, for instance, where you just get a backstory to her. Shout out to Ayo Edebiri for directing. I thought that was a phenomenal directed episode and one of my favorites of the season. And maybe not even just the season, but honestly of the year. But that Tina episode like hit me like a stone wall. And then the one with the sister in the hospital with her mom, that's another one that's just strong development there. And The Bear season 3 just showcased the best parts about the series, and for me, made me love it. Number 10, bro haters, whatever, hate me. Seriously, I don't care. Rings of Power season 2 is phenomenal. It's way better than season 1, and I say that as someone who enjoyed season 1. I thought the first 2 episodes were awesome and amazing, and I loved them. And then the back half was fine. I thought it was still decent. I was going to give season 2 a shot, and what's interesting is I had no interest in reviewing this series again, but when I saw the trailers at Comic-Con, I was like, this seems awesome. I think I'm going to review this. And I ended up reviewing it, and I found Rings of Power, and as a point of context, I watched this in a binge model. I didn't have to wait week to week. I just got to watch it on one set of binge, and that was the best thing I could have done. I found Rings of Power to be such an improvement over season 1. The first few episodes still feel a little bit lingering and left over from season 1, but the rest of it just felt more tightened, more secure. We're not jumping around to each character, having to show each episode what they're doing. And I don't know if that was in the scripts or in terms of the editing, but Rings of Power season 2 made me very impressed to go, I can't wait for a season 3. And I never thought I'd be saying that. Number 9, The Boys season 4. A lot of people found this to be the weakest season. I find this to be the second best season. Definitely setup. There's a lot of setup series this year, kind of setting up for the final seasons, in my opinion, or just in general, what is to come. And I feel like The Boys season 4 just delivers that goodness that I love from The Boys. But I felt like what it did better for me, and perhaps on season 3, where season 3 I thought went gross to be gross. Season 4 definitely still has some of those moments. I felt like that every single thing in season 4 very much infused its love for what we love inside this series. And the fact that we only have one more season really saddens me, but at the same time, I found season 4 of The Boys to just be exactly what I wanted. Number 8, Creature Commandos season 1, which we can say now because season 2 has officially been announced. And season 1, I've seen the whole thing. I know the season doesn't technically end until 2025, so some of you guys are still waiting for it. But one who was just excited for Creature Commandos because it's Monsters, James Gunn, and a Suicide Squad spiritual sequel. That all excites me. But it didn't mean that I was over the moon excited for this series either, because once I saw the animation and in general what they were kind of doing with this series, I don't know. I was just kind of sitting there like, what are we doing, James Gunn? You're kicking your universe off with a punt instead of a kickoff with Superman. But I watched Creature Commandos, and I mean, it won me over. I sat down and binged it in one sitting too, and by the end, I was just totally won over. I like that each episode and the way that it focuses is. I like the fact that each episode focuses in on one character particularly, and the way that it really does recontextualize everything that you kind of think about within this. And I find that each and every one of the characters are genuinely likable to a certain degree, even if they are a terrible person. I think for me, when you get episodes like Weasel and G.I. Robot and Nina's, which is coming up fairly soon, I think those 3 episodes really made me fall in love with this squad, that I'm excited to see what they'll be able to do with the season 2. And now my number 7 is Arcane season 2, which I do not think is as good as the first season, like even close to it, but I still found to be a phenomenal piece of, I want to say cinema. Can we say Arcane is cinema, even though it's not a movie? But it makes me sad that we didn't get more. I feel like another season would have been needed to really develop everything with the 2 sisters, but I'm excited to see more of the world of Arcane. They've talked about having multiple different spinoffs and things like that, but Arcane Season 2 kind of just delivered most of what I was expecting to get after the events of Season 1. I think Jinx still is one of the coolest characters. I think Vi is just awesome, and overall, the animation is so superb. It is one of the best animated things I've ever seen. And number 6 is I think one of the few shows on here I actually watched twice all the way through, and that is Fallout. Now, I'm a massive fan of the video games, and I was very excited when I heard Lisa Joy and Jonathan Nolan were going to be creating a Fallout show for Amazon Prime. But at the same time, you get a little bit worried. Are they actually going to be able to pull this off? You know, they did a great job with Westworld. I think Lisa Joy did an amazing job with Reminiscent. If you didn't see that movie with Hugh Jackman, very underrated. And so the show comes out, and I binged it in, I think, 2 sittings for this one when the screeners came in, and then I watched it again with my best friend Phil, who's also a massive Fallout fan. And again, I thought it was amazing, like in every way. I think the series only grew on me specifically on that second rewatch where I see every single avenue of what they really nailed down. And the fact that this is renewed now, and the way that the series ends with potentially going to New Vegas, which is for Fallout fans like one of the biggest things ever. This excites me to no end that I think a season 2 could even be better than season 1. And just, yeah, wow. Like, Fallout is such a good show. At my number 5, this is also one of the other shows that I watched again and again and again. I think this is my most rewatched show of the year, and that is Ted. I didn't think a Ted series would work, doing a young John Bennett. I just wondered, why would you not just do another Ted 3 with Mark Wahlberg? I know Ted 2 didn't really do the well at the box office, but I just was curious. And to say the least, this show is so funny. Even though it is basically live-action Family Guy, it is so fucking funny. It is so hilarious. And seeing the origins of Ted and John's relationship, I think, is great. There's some continuity stuff in there that bothers me in terms of with like the family and things like that was set up in the movie. But regardless, once you like put that to the side, you can just absolutely enjoy the ever living shit out of this and smile and laugh and just be completely intertwined with the show. That every episode, there was at least a few jokes that had me gut busting, specifically the Halloween one, which I think is the best episode of the entire series. But I love this series. I'm so happy we're getting a season 2, and I don't know if we'll ever get a season 3 because apparently the show's very expensive, but I think Peacock would be dumb to cancel this show. On my number 4 is The Ones Who Live. This is the Walking Dead spinoff. Out of any of the ones they've announced, this is the only one I've cared for, very much so. Even though I've enjoyed the Negan and Maggie one and very much enjoyed the Daryl Dixon one, which I did not get a chance to watch season 2 yet, but I wanted to see where Rick and Michonne went. I think all of us fans who were still following along with The Walking Dead wanted to see where the 2 best characters in the entire show went. And I think, while I understand the issues that most people have with this series, I have one, and that is, I wish it was longer. I wish they would have announced season 2. I wish they would have maybe taken their time a little bit more with this, or maybe given us just a couple more episodes to flesh out some of the ideas. But in terms of a Rick and Michonne love story and them reuniting, succeeding, and showing that no matter what, and I think The Walking Dead really fell into this, is that love is like a big, strong factor in hope of keeping things alive. And while the show gets definitely a little bit lovey ooey gooey type stuff towards the end, that these 2, no matter what, together can do anything, maybe disappoints some. But for me, I was so utterly into it and so infatuated with it that I think this is like some of the best Walking Dead content we've gotten in years. And I think it's as close to perfect as it's going to get. I think both Denai Guerrera and Andrew Lincoln have some of the best performances in this entire thing. The whole lockdown episode, I think, is one of the most important ones. But I just found that The Ones Who Live, for a long time, this was my favorite show of the year. And I honestly went back and forth about putting it higher onto this list, but I didn't get a chance to rewatch this one. But I cannot recommend this one enough. For if you dropped off on The Walking Dead, if you finished it and you just didn't care for any of these spinoffs, this series was amazing. Get into my number 3, and that is Presumed Innocence, a series that I just watched basically because Ruth Negga and Jake Gyllenhaal were in. And when I watched it with my wife, oh man, this was a fucking roller coaster of a ride that I think is so good. Another series that I highly recommend, and this is, I think, the only Apple TV series I actually got to go through and binge through. But man, Jake Gyllenhaal is amazing. This Ruth is incredible. The entire cast, bar none, is amazing. But the twists and turns that you kind of find out about this is that this man's having an affair. Oh, the girl dies. He's kind of blamed for it. And it kind of has this instance of, did he do it? Did he not? And you'll have those conversations with your significant other or whoever you're watching this with. And that for me is like when you have great TV, when every episode ends and you literally have to question one another on who did it, what didn't they do. And I think Apple TV also did another great series like this with Defending Jacob. So if you enjoyed Defending Jacob, I think you might enjoy Presumed Innocence. Personally, I enjoyed Presumed Innocence a little bit more, so maybe you'll like this one a little bit more as well. Then at my number 2 is X-Men 97, a series that I wanted to be gratefully excited for because I love the original X-Men animated series, but I also didn't know if they'd be able to pull it off in this year. And what I realized watching this was, this is the X-Men. This is the best version of the X-Men that you could possibly get. And it makes you, like, honestly, the God, like, hate some of the live action films, because I went back and rewatched every single one of those this year as well because of Deadpool and Wolverine. But X-Men 97, I feel like, accomplished so much, and I can't wait to see what season 2's, and I think they even announced the season 3 already. But for me, this is like the redefining nature of it. I love that original show for nostalgia purposes, but I feel like this is the grown-up version, and they knew who their audience truly was, where kids can enjoy it, but at the same time, the X-Men have a lot to say, and adults really hit into that. And I found, again, X-Men 97 just blew me away. I expected the series to be good, and I didn't expect it to be great. And by the time I got to that Gambit and Rogue and Magneto episode, I fell in love with this series. I still think, and I still will go as far as say, I think that is my favorite episode of television this year, which made it really hard. I went back and forth if this was my favorite show of the year or my number one, but if you still have not watched X-Men 97, what the fuck are you doing? But my number one of this year is The Penguin. I think The Penguin is, bar none, maybe even the best comic books TV series of all time. Like top 3 at least. I think the argument can be made to that. And this was a series that it was my most anticipated series of the year. The Batman is my favorite Batman movie of all time. I'm so sad that part 2 is being pushed back, but I know Matt Reeves is going to deliver. The Penguin was announced, and it felt like it took forever to get to. And to watch this series and see how much love was put into it, how much passion, and how they didn't make the Penguin out to be an anti-hero. He is a scum of the earth. And even at times, you are not cheering for him at all because he is such a piece of shit. But you are fascinated through every episode. And the Penguin is more than just a blueprint of the Sopranos in the Batman world. It is in itself a character study of 2 different villains and the path that they go down. Christina Milioti, or I think it's Kristen Milioti, so good as Sophia in here that genuinely at times you are rooting for her to beat Oswald Cobblepot. And I love the fact that they really dive in and deal with both of their ideologies and the fact that Gotham is in a war-torn status with the gangs all across after the events of the Batman. I find this to be a great kind of like in-between story for the Batman and the Batman Part 2, and I found that the Penguin was just great. Of course, Colin Farrell is phenomenal as this character as well. I love, love, love this series, and I think a lot of you guys probably did as well, but it had to be my number one. Thinking of every TV series I watched in the year 2024, I apologize if I seem a little bit tired. I am. Like I said, we had a newborn this year, and it's definitely been a lot, but thank you so much again, guys, for watching this. We got one more big video to kick off the new year, and that is the most anticipated movies for next year. There's a lot of stuff coming on, and then what you might notice is in the earlier start of 2025, I might do a couple of live streams. I also might do a couple more shorts to kind of just intersplice until we start getting some movies in theaters. But other than that, guys, thank you so much again for watching this, and of course, until next time, stay classy.